نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وجاهد في الله حق المجاهدة حتى أتاه اليقين ونصلي عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل كما جاء في محكم التنزيل: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله بما تعملون خبير. My dear brothers and sisters, praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a lifestyle. It is putting everything in our life in His hands. And the way we do that is by proper knowledge and focus in our lives. Sincerity, righteousness. Making sure that our heart is in the right place, seeking His favor, seeking His blessing, and that our deeds are seeking to serve His cause. That is the true tasbih. That is the true glorification and praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the reality of human beings, everybody is tested in their life with various different, as they say, hands of cards that are dealt to every different person and group of people. And as individuals and collectives, what is most important is to review our intentions and to look at what is the impact of what we're going to do and to join on what is best. I was in last night with a sisters development group where the sisters come out on Thursday nights. There's about 12 of them. And they look to take a focused effort. So one of the new sisters that has joined a few months ago, she said, "Imam, how do I know how to fix my heart? How do I know there's something wrong with my heart?" That, what she just did, is the first step. To assume that there is something I need to do to my heart, and to continue that assumption every day I wake up. Never to assume that my heart is fine and I know what I'm supposed to do and everything's okay and my plan for everything is set and there's no need to change anything. When somebody thinks like that, that person has been blinded. We call it ghurur, maghrur. That's what the word in Arabic is. Someone who has been fooled by their desire to not need to grow and develop and assess themselves. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swore, "La uqsimu biyawmil qiyamah wa la uqsimu bin nafsil lawwama." He swore, no, the reality that people are living of fooling themselves, He swears there will be a day that everyone will be resurrected from their graves and they will be judged for the way they acted, what they did and what they said. Every single bit of that will be counted either in their favor or against them. Then He says, "And I swear by the solution to the problem of living a life of being fooled, which is to have a self-accounting, self-assessing attitude towards your reality. Not to ever assume I'm in the clear, I'm good, my way is the right way, without thinking sincerely and looking into the knowledge of Quran and Sunnah as a result." So one of the major sicknesses of the heart is the absence of spiritual focus. It is a weakness in spirituality. It is the absence of mercy and compassion. It is hasad. Hasad. Hasad is a reality. Min sharri hasidin idha hasad. We're supposed to be saying this many times a day, according to the example of the Prophet ﷺ. In the morning, after Fajr, after Dhuhr, after Asr, after Maghrib, after Isha, in the evening before you go to bed, 3 times in the morning, 3 times in the night. You're saying this surah at least 20-30 times a day, right? If we're saying it and we know what we mean, then we are seeking refuge from either becoming a person of envy, or our heart being afflicted with such a darkness, or being afflicted by someone else who has envy. So what is envy? What is hasad in Arabic? Imam al-Jawhari, he says, أَن تَتَمَنَّ زَوَالَ نِعْمَةِ الْمَحْسُودِ, that you wish that the blessings, the good things that the one you envy is removed from them. Ibn Taymiyyah took a different route. He says, الْبُغْضُ وَالْكَرَاهَةُ لِمَا يَرَاهُ مِنْ حُسْنِ حَالِ الْمَحْسُودِ. It is hatred and dislike for what one sees of a good situation, of benefit and blessings of the one that they envy. And the majority, Ibn al-Manzur, the author of Lisan al-Arab, and most of the linguists, they said, hasadahu, to have envy for someone, تتمنى أن تتحول إليه نعمته وفضيلته أو يسلبه ما هو منه. That it is to wish to take away from someone else the blessings and the advantages and the favors that they have, and to have those removed from that person, or to have them brought to oneself. And if you have to try to make that happen, you will do everything that you can in order to make it happen. Interestingly enough, if we go to the English lexicon and we look up the word envy, we get the exact same gathering of those meanings in the English language. So the dictionary says it is a feeling of discontent, starting inside, a feeling of discontent, and covetousness and desire for something with regard to another person's successes, advantages, or belongings. So you look at someone else and what they have and what they've achieved and what they have, and you want that to be taken away from them. This is the nature of hasad. And so the scholars, they talk about it from a spiritual angle, and they say it is a sickness of the heart. It is that missing spiritual focus, a desire for others to have good things, a desire for a positive outlook on life, a desire for compassion and mercy to spread. These are the good thoughts of a heart that is sound and pure, right? Qalbin salim, what we call it. It does not have bad, it doesn't look at things and see the bad immediately and look for the bad and try to find something wrong with it and try to stop it if it goes against their immediate desires. Rather, they look into it with a sincere, good, willing, compassionate approach, and they see the big picture and they support the good and they look for the good in it. So the Prophet ﷺ warned us. He said, إِيَّاكُمُ الظَّنَّ فَإِنَّ الظَّنَّ أَكْذَبَ الْحَدِيثِ. And unfortunately we see this all around the world with people who have envy of other people. They assume for themselves, or they assume about another person something without knowing the real situation, and they spread all kind of lies trying to get at the one they have hasad for as a result. And this is a major sickness. So the Prophet ﷺ said, beware of suspicions and assumptions about others, because it leads to the most false of speech. So then he says, وَلَا تَحَسَّسُوا. The Prophet ﷺ warned us in the authentic hadith, do not look for the faults of the Muslims. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. Do not spy on the Muslims. لَا تَحَاسَدُوا. Do not have envy for the Muslims. لَا تَبَاغَضُوا. Do not hate the Muslims. لَا تَدَابَرُوا. Don't turn your back on the other Muslims. وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا. Be brothers and sisters in faith. Be people who want good for each other, supporting each other in good. تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Interact and work with each other in righteousness and piety and promoting those concepts. And do not interact and conflict and turn on each other because of enmity, sin, and transgression. So the Prophet ﷺ warned us, دَبَّ إِلَيْكُمْ دَاءُ الْأُمَمِ الْحَسَدُ وَالْبَغْضَاءُ وَهِيَ الْحَالِقَةُ لَا لا أقول تحلق الشعر تحلق الدين. The Prophet ﷺ warned us very strongly. He said, I'm warning you that it's going to creep up on you, that you will find the sickness of all nations before you, and that is envy and hatred amongst yourselves. And those will cut away your reality. And he said, I don't mean, because the linguistic term used, cut your hair. I mean cut away the religion, meaning alienating people from the religion and wanting to be part and support the religion because they just see all this envy and hatred going around and they feel like, man, the religious people are no good. It's always negative and bad. Why would I want to? How is that spiritually fulfilling for me? Right? So this is the warning of the Prophet ﷺ. So there are 5 causes that lead to hasad, this dark sickness of the heart. First and foremost is entitlement. Entitlement, the beginning of all sin, to assume I was the one that he says, shaitan, that should have been bowed down to. It's my right. And he doesn't care what evidence that God, the creator of the universe, tells him. I know from the get-go that he should not have been the one chosen. And so he felt that was his entitlement, right? So thinking that things should be for you, you should have them and others shouldn't have them, and that you have a special one up, because the second one fixes that problem, and that is arrogance. To assume one better and above other people. That the world's revolving around you and your desires, your whims, your ideas should be the best, and you don't even look into the other side with a humble reality. So if you can't humble yourself, then you're going to assume entitlement immediately. Those two go together, arrogance and entitlement, and they lead to envy and hatred of those who have what you don't have and what you think is yours and that you're entitled to. And the next one is just simply disliking people. Biased, whatever, if it's based in the arrogance that you have, whatever, you just like, I don't like that person. So then when you see that person get something that you want, or you think you should have, or that you think they shouldn't have, then you start to have hasad for that person. The next one is greed, just wanting everything for yourself. I think I should have stinginess, shuh, right? Greed, this is another one. And then the last one is ignorance. Ignorance, jahl. Not knowing what you're judging and why and how, and just making judgments and throwing around statements without real sound knowledge and understanding of what's really happening and what is the situation of the person that now you have this envy for, and what their intentions and what they're doing with whatever it is that you want from them. So these are the unfortunate forces behind it. What are the effects of it? The effects of it, and by the way, everything that I'm telling you, it comes from the book Nadrat al-Na'im fi Makarim Akhlaq al-Rasul al-Kareem, the 12-volume book of character. These are just basic translations. This is nothing, I'm not saying anything from whatever I think. Every single one came directly from a book written by a whole bunch of scholars in the Muslim world. Okay? So they said that the first major evil effect of hasad is enmity. When people who wish that others not have something and they wish that they should have it, they start to hate those people. They start to have enmity. They want to cause problems. They wish ill on them. They pray against them. They take actions and steps to cause problems for those people. A lot of people, when you hear hasad, people automatically think of the ayn, which the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, al-aynu haqq, that somehow there is some, and you may know it, like you sitting somewhere and you feel somebody looking at you and you notice that there is something going on with that eye. But that is not the majority. That's probably a very small amount. Otherwise, all these actors and rich basketball players be falling down as they're going through the game, because everybody's like, man, I wish I had LeBron James skills, right? Yeah, but unfortunately, that's not probably the widespread effect of hasad. The widespread effect of hasad is spreading lies and slander and taking acts and actions in order to cause problems for the one that you envy and that you wish ill towards. So this is unfortunately the reality that we see. The second one is anxiety and depression, al-ham wal-gham. You start to be bothered and constantly bothered and thinking about, why don't I have that? Why should they have that? They shouldn't have that. And so you develop these problems inside, and it's bothering, it's causing problems with other people in your life, and so forth. And so Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he had a beautiful statement of wisdom. He said, كُلُّ النَّاسِ أَقْدِرُ عَلَى رِضَاهُ إِلَّا حَاسِدَ نِعْمَةٍ لَا يُرْضِيهِ إِلَّا زَوَالَ النِّعْمَةِ. So the Muawiyah, he's talking about these first two problems, this continuous enmity because the other one does not have removed from them what you want removed from them, and the feeling of bothersome inside you until it is removed. Muawiyah says, I feel like I can, with wisdom and interacting with good words and doing whatever I can monetarily or whatever, please anyone. I feel like I can please anyone, Muawiyah says, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, except for the one that is envy in somebody else's successes, advantages, or property. That person, the only way they will ever be happy until they either cure the sickness of their heart or the blessing is taken from them, from the person they wish that it was taken from. So Muawiyah makes this very important point. And obviously the last and worst situation of hasad is the loss of all of your deeds. The Prophet ﷺ says, إِيَّاكُمُ الْحَسَدِ فَإِنَّ الْحَسَدَ يَأْكُلُ الْحَسَنَاتِ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ النَّارُ الْحَطَبِ. Beware of envy, because envy will eat away your hasanat like fire eats up the wood that it is burning. So this is unfortunately the reality. Inshallah, in our second khutbah, we will produce a solution as our scholars and as the Quran and the Sunnah has given for us for understanding how to deal with the sickness of the heart of envy and all of the afflictions and harm that it causes. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We're reflecting on trying to promote a sound heart, trying to develop a spirituality through reading the Quran and the Sunnah and through gathering with the Muslims, our fellow believers, and promoting good and promoting positivity and trying to develop a focus on how to best serve the interests of representing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. That's our goal, that's our mission. We hope that we do that all collectively and individually to the best of our ability till the day that we die. So there's a famous hadith that the Prophet ﷺ is giving a lecture. And there are many people sitting there in this lecture. And Anas bin Malik is narrating us the hadith. And Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As is a young boy at the time. And he's a devout Muslim, mashallah, with a lot of zealousness and hopes to become a very deep, spiritually focused young man. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, somebody will come through the door who is a person of Jannah, and then walks in the masjid. Some people said Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, some people said Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. There's different narrations as to who it was, but that's not necessarily the important point here. He sits down, and Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As is watching him. And he seems like an average guy, simple guy. And so he says, I was wondering if you will allow me to visit with you in your home. I just want to follow you. And he said, okay, but he didn't tell him why. Obviously he wants to see what is the way of the people of Jannah. What is their attitude? How do they function? So he visited with him, and he stayed 3 days and 3 nights with him. And he was kind of bothered and kind of belittled the man. And he went to some other companions and he said, the Prophet ﷺ said that man was a person of Jannah. And I noticed he did not even pray one qiyam layl. He didn't stay up in the night. He didn't fast one day. And, he doesn't do a lot of dhikr. I noticed that I might hear some dhikr in the night when I'm praying qiyam layl, when he's moving or something while he's sleeping. Maybe he woke up or something. But, he just gets up, prays all the fard prayers, and is a nice guy, and he's positive. So then he went to him and he told him, he said, what is the thing that you think might have made the Prophet ﷺ say this? He says, my most cherishable part of my spirituality is that I do not hold in my heart hatred or jealousy and envy towards my fellow Muslims. Before I go to sleep, I forgive everybody, I overlook, I forgive and forget everything. And I keep a good state of thinking with them. And so he says, هَذِهِ الَّتِي بَلَغَتْ بِكْ. This is what has brought you to this level of going to heaven, thus giving him a very different approach than the common person looks at spirituality. Common person looks the most spiritual, the one that is praying all the time, reading and memorizing all the Quran and reciting in a beautiful way. Someone who is fasting every day. Those are acts of worship. But as the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was sent for the sole purpose of perfecting a good standard of character. And the Prophet ﷺ, in the famous hadith, he made very clear when the companions, they came asking the Prophet ﷺ, they said, mashallah, we have this very confusing lady that lives by us. And they said, what's her situation? So they told the Prophet ﷺ, mashallah, during the day she fasts most days, and in the night we hear her reading the Quran for Qiyam Layl in there. But unfortunately during the day she comes out and she yells and screams and is harsh and disrespectful and uses foul language towards everybody. The Prophet ﷺ said, Hiya fin nar, as the authentic hadith is narrated in Bukhari, if I'm not mistaken. That woman is going to hell, which tells us a big lesson that it's not just about how much worship or even how much knowledge or whatever it is that you think entitles you to spirituality. Is at the end of the day how you act and how that affects other people. If the way you're acting is causing enmity and strife and anger and hatred and bad feelings for Muslims, amongst Muslims, then clearly we have not understood the purpose of our spirituality and the guidance that came in the Quran and the Sunnah. And obviously we've made many sermons and will continue to make sermons about the example of the Prophet ﷺ to people who said and did so many things against him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he returned with such an amazing standard of character, with such a good, peaceful, loving, compassionate attitude towards those people. So how do we solve our heart? How do we make sure, how do we introspectively look into our heart and make sure that it's in a good state? Right? إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. That on the Day of Judgment, nobody's going to be benefited with wealth and kids and statuses and doctorates and all of these things. That will do you no good on the Day of Judgment. What will do you good is that you come with a sound heart. Meaning what? The core of who you are, your soul, has been nurtured and developed and cared for with an introspective, self-accounting focus in your life. We live in a materialistic world, and there's constant brainwashing to make us all just consumers. And you just buy stuff and we get the levels of degrees and we make money and we are proud of all of these things, and those are most important to us. But at the end of the day, we have to see what is the impact that what we do in the world is making on others. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We only sent you, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, except as an act of mercy to the whole world. And so the first step is to go into your heart and be sincere for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. The first step for any path of spiritual focus is to think, is the things I'm doing, and even start before you say something, before you do something, before you promote something, whatever it may be, you must stop and think, am I really doing this because I think it is serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is there something just for me and what I want involved in this? Or am I trying to please a certain other group of people that I fit in with or whatever? This is where we first start. Then after that, we try to develop attitudes in our heart that keep a sense of peace, compassion, gentleness, mercy, love, honesty, sincerity, trustworthiness. All of these good things, if they're in the heart, they will bring positive effects in the world. We have to try to bring those in the world. So the Prophet ﷺ was asked, he said, Ayyun nasi afdal, who are the best among the people? He says, Kullu makhmum al-qalb saduq al-lisan. قالوا نعرف ما هو صدوق اللسان فما هو مخموم القلب؟ فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم التقي النقي لا إثم فيه ولا بغي ولا غل ولا حسد. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم solved the whole issue about what makes you the best person that you can be. He said it is the one with a pure heart and an honest, sincere, good speaking tongue. Right? And so then they said, okay, we know what it means to have an honest, sincere, good-speaking tongue. But what does it mean just to have a pure heart? He says it is the heart that has God consciousness, a fear of standing in front of our Lord responsible for everything that we've done in our life. At-taqi, an-naqi, that it doesn't allow the filth and the corruption of the worldly interests and carnal, egotistical desires to overwhelm the spiritual focus of serving Allah Azza wa Jal. There's purity in there. He says, La ithma fihi, that there is not a focus or an intention to do sin in that heart. Because a true believer, a true best person is one that doesn't intentionally do sins. They just slip up here and there. Astaghfirullah, a'udhu billah, I said, or I went, I looked in that direction, whatever, and they realize, a'udhu billah. But people who intentionally sin regularly, those are not the best people according to the Prophet ﷺ. Wala baghi, and they don't have enmity and aggression towards other people. This is not the way of the best people according to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wala ghil, they don't hate people. They don't have hatred for people, particularly those who believe in Allah in the last day. Wala hasad, and they do not have this envy and this feeling of wanting, not wanting good for others. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to facilitate for us a path to a pure heart. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us the best people in His eyes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to gather us in what is in the best interest of the Muslims in the future of Charlotte, North Carolina. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide our youth to become leaders and to make a good future for Muslims and represent Islam and be ambassadors of the religion as the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our shortcomings and weaknesses and flaws, and to help us to remove those sins by taking a focused, motivated intention in our life to serve Him and His cause. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that wherever we go and whatever we do, that we are accounting ourselves that we're trying to serve Him in our cause. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his example the most noble to us, that we increase in reading his life and his examples in what he said and what he did. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with goodness and positivity and happiness and love and compassion, as was the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unify the hearts of the believers and that they see the good and help each other in good in everything that they do. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not allow anybody to divide themselves with others because of a difference of opinion. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the Muslims are unified on what is foundational and there is no disagreement amongst it on the scholars. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this community and to make us those who bring the light of Islam to this community. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us all, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His peace and blessings and mercy upon Muhammad, His final servant and messenger.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu